The media is now taking on Bernie Sanders, and he's feeling the heat. Bernie is now making mistakes. Let's bring in Heritage Foundation's Kelsey Bolar. Kelsey, great to see you. Bernie claims his government takeover of health care is not a government takeover of health care. His own legislation with Elizabeth Warren says, yeah, it is. Let's listen to what Bernie has in store for voters. Watch this.
On the Medicare for All, one of the provisions we have to pay for it is a 4% tax on income, exempting the first $29,000. But they will be paying, and you got to deal with that.
So taxing 30,000 households, or people making 30,000.
Liz, first off, Medicare, Medicaid, whatever you want to call it, for all, is obviously a government takeover of the healthcare industry. It means you have Bernie Sanders telling the American public you have one option, one plan for your healthcare, and if you don't like it, too bad, because it is illegal to go out and seek any other plan. So it's important to make that clear. Now, as for the cost, Bernie Sanders claims it's impossible to communicate how much it really will cost. Well, there have been 3 independent analyses that have all found that this plan would cost somewhere around $32 trillion just for 10 years. And that means raising the taxes, payroll taxes, for 70% of Americans. And so when you put those facts in front of Americans, you know, government-funded healthcare might sound great, but once they actually hear about these details, what it will cost, and the fact that they have no other alternative if they're not happy with what Bernie Sanders provides, it suddenly becomes deeply unpopular.
You know, Bernie would get rid of Obamacare, get rid of Medicare, Medicaid, S-CHIP, federal employees' health benefits, military's TRICARE program, benefits under ERISA. We just showed what his own law says. Bernie, though, is misleading. Even his own former campaign manager, Simone Sanders, is now working for Joe Biden, says you can't be Donald Trump with double talk and not being, you know, clear on your socialist health care plan. Here's Margaret Brennan pointing that out to Bernie Sanders. Watch this.
You're advocating for the empowerment of the U.S. government to take over the entire health care system. This just optically looks like the party can't run its own caucus.
Margaret, that's not a true statement. I'm not advocating for the United States government to take over the health care system. What I am advocating for is an expansion of Medicare. Medicare exists.
Right.
I want to expand it over a 4-year period.
Which would be administered by the U.S. government. And
precisely.
Okay. He's trying to have it both ways. He's trying to say expand Medicare, but it's a government takeover. It's everybody gets put inside the government. Your reaction?
Liz, that was deeply dishonest, the way Bernie Sanders described that, because what this healthcare proposal that he has proposed both in the Senate and now as a presidential candidate would mean government bureaucrats are making decisions about what type of healthcare you can purchase and how much it costs. That means there's no private sector competition. That means you get one choice whether you like it or not.
You know, Bernie's also now trying to rebrand his image as a, quote, Democrat socialist. He's not a communist, he says. But even in Democrat socialist countries like Sweden and Denmark, they're saying, we're not what you are selling, Bernie. We're capitalist models that support big welfare systems. In those countries, people pay 15% of health costs out of pocket. Denmark and Finland don't have a minimum wage. They have their own labor unions negotiating with worker organizations and companies for what the wages should be. So, you know, he's constantly trying to retrace and recast and, you know, who do you believe, me or your lying eyes about my history? He's also now downplaying. He wanted at one point a government-run maximum wage and tax 100% of income. He's now saying, I never was for that. The documents, the reporting, the newspapers reporting, the media headlines, the media soundbites, it's all there, Kelsey.
Liz, Medicare for All is really only the beginning of the types of proposals that you would be getting under a truly socialist leader. And that is why this is a very important election and very important debate between capitalism and socialism, because as you correctly pointed out, Denmark and Sweden are not socialist countries. They have big welfare systems, but they have very free economies, some of the most free economies in the world. And on top of that, for those on the left who express sympathy for those types of welfare systems, well, you need to look at those immigration systems in Denmark and Sweden that come along with it.
Kelsey, great to see you. Come back soon.
Thank you, Liz.